Hello, everyone, and welcome to our May 360 presentation. I'm Curator of Education Anna Smith, and today it's my pleasure to introduce artist Liz Larner. Liz Larner's work combines a geometric formal vocabulary with a pervasive sense of movement and change. Over a period of 25 years living and working in Los Angeles, she has used a wide range of materials to create environments that engage the formal language of minimalism in order to question its precepts and assumptions. Larner has been the subject of solo exhibitions throughout Europe and the United States, notably showing at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, Washington, D.C., the Museum of Contemporary Art, Los Angeles, Kunsthaus Graz, Austria, and Kunsthaus Basel. Larner has been honored with multiple awards, including a Pacific Design Center Stars of Design Award in 2005, Lucelia Artist Award by the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, D.C., 2002, Anonymous was a Woman Award, 2000, and a Guggenheim Fellowship in 1999. Her work resides in many important collections, including the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Smithsonian American Art Museum, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and internationally at the Fundación Colección UMEX in Mexico City and Deste Foundation in Athens. Larner has also been selected to take part in the Nasher Sculpture Center's 10th anniversary exhibition, Nasher Exchange, and will debut a new sculpture as part of this project in October 2013. We're so pleased that she can be with us this afternoon. Please join me in welcoming Liz Larner.
So thank you, Anna, for that really nice introduction, and I'd like to thank the Nasher for inviting me to come and speak. It's really an honor to speak at an institution that values sculpture so much, and I'm very grateful to be able to be here and talk to you today and show you my work. Let's see, let me get ready here. I have a little frog in my throat, so please excuse me if I might have to use a lozenge. Yes, I'd like to start. Maybe you could bring up the first slide. Or maybe I should bring up the first slide. How does that work? There it is. I'd like to start with reading an artist statement that I wrote this year. And then I'll explain a little bit about how this talk is organized. And then we'll go ahead and go through. And I won't be reading too much more than that. So the art I make is centered in the physical, but not in the way that the physical has come to be most ordinarily recognized. I choose to make sculpture because it is the most physical of art forms. It is hard to do and takes up space and time and money, but including and beyond this, sculpture shares the space with us. It is most like another of us. It is a surrogate for an other. Our shared experience as embodied subjects is affirmed when we are in the presence of this most physical medium of expression. Sculpture eschews the functional, but not very obviously. Sculpture is the poesis of poetic form, a concrete poem, the physical as a poem. Sculpture is the most physical iteration of no thing. It is paradoxical in this way. Like the physical, the object is something I consider deeply. The concept of the object has been made to be the container of something discredited, perhaps profane, and yet overly revered in contemporary society. This may be because objects remind us so directly of the physical, how much we need it and are it, how transitory and yet achingly real we are. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, in a continuum with apple and rosy cheeks, polished bronze and patina. This is hard to explain in words in a short statement. I prefer to make a sculpture or show you some sculptures. If our collective conception of the object were to change and we were to value all objects as the expression of another subject, rather than as a singular thing to grasp after or toss out, our world would be a very different and lovelier place. The objects that surround us would also change. Color is widely powerful, yet it has hardly been explored in sculpture and object making other than to reinforce form or to reiterate many of the tropes already well worn in industry and painting. I hope to do something different and allow color to change form. Color it, if you will. I hope to bring out something within the form that the certainty of form has hidden. In this way, they both exist simultaneously. Neither truly eclipses the other, as they also share space. Form is inflected by how it has come about, how it has come to be. It can't be separated from this. In my work, the inseparable relationship of material, the conceptual and the formal, is the message most of the time. Not just a sign, but as a feeling, not just as a sign, but as a feeling, a sensation, and an experience, and most hopefully as a reveling in our embodied state. So the time has come when I cannot show everything that I've made in a lecture in 1 hour, which is a good and maybe a bad thing. But I've tried to, I've whittled this lecture down, so it's a selection of work that I've made over the past 25 years. And, but there are a lot of slides, so I'm going to try to get through it and show you everything. But if I feel I'm kind of lagging behind, I'll try to speed up at the end, so I hope you don't mind. So this piece, let me just preface it, one more thing, that I graduated from Cal Arts in 1985. My degree was actually in photography. And I went to Cal Arts during what I kind of call high appropriation era. And a lot of the photography that was being done at that time and looked at and considered was appropriation photography, appropriation-based photography. You know, Barbara Kruger, Cindy Sherman, and we also were reading a lot of Baudrillard and thinking a lot about the simulacra in the real. And the way that I came out of that was to kind of fall on the side of the real. And that's what led me to wanting to make sculpture and to deal with, real or physical space and materials. And so I started off trying to do that, but actually still making photographs. And this is one of them. This is, I made this piece, and it's everything that, it's called painting paraphernalia, and it's everything that you need to make an oil painting, but not in the right order or amount. So it's canvas and rabbit skin glue, a paintbrush, and oil paint, but it's not organized properly to make what we consider to be a painting. And this is about 1986. Let's see, I'm having trouble. There we go. So being a young artist in LA at that time, LA was not the hotbed of art that it is today, and there weren't too many places to show. So some friends and I, two other friends, Cindy Bernard and Martha Godfrey, decided to make our own show, one-night show, at a motel in Los Angeles, the Tropicana Motel, which was kind of an interesting place. It was sort of a rock and roll hotel on Santa Monica Boulevard, and also the place where Andy Warhol filmed Heat. So after the next morning, because we all spent the night, of course, the next morning, I brought my works out onto poolside and took photographs of them. And this is Tropicana pool water, guitar strings, and mercury. And this is brown liquors, 10 different brown liquors, 10 milliliters each. And this is, I guess, kind of like the first culture piece that I made. This is orchid buttermilk penny, which is what the ingredients are. And this is it at 3 weeks. So inevitably, the next thing that happened was I had to figure out, how to get these culture pieces that I was interested in making in the place that I wanted the viewership to see them, which is I wanted people to look over them. So it sort of pushed me into making an object that was, I considered the base at the time. And so this was the base that I made for Orchid Buttermilk Penny, and it's actually now on display. It's the first time it's been up since 1990. It's in a show at Columbia called Speak Memory, curated by Bo Rutherford. So the idea with that one was to show, every time I would show it, to put a new, fresh culture in next to the older one. So the penny kind of is always from the year that it's made. So it sort of marks the time, the date that it was made. This is another cultural work called Cough in the Bottom of My Shoe. And at this point, I wanted to incorporate color, and I would pour 3 levels of agar, a red, a yellow, and a blue, and then I would introduce whatever it was I was going to culture, and the bacteria would then dig into the media, which is the agar, and the colored agar, and then produce what's known in science as these blooms, that they have a lifespan. and live basically until the food or the nutrient is exhausted. And so they would make these very colorful blooms because of the addition of the color to the nutrient agar. The other material that's used to create scientific cultures is collagen, and it's used to grow proteins mostly. But I wanted to use that. I think this piece was made in the very early 90s. It was the first time that collagen had kind of come on the market as a beauty, as a material to increase beauty. And so I wanted to put collagen with one of the most stable materials, gold, and water-soluble fluorescent dye, which is one of the most fugitive colors that there is. So it's, I'll just leave it at that. I won't make any more comments on it. This is another culture I was showing with Margot Levin, who is a dealer in Los Angeles who just closed her gallery, sadly, this past year. But she's a powerhouse, and she was showing a lot of minimal artists at the time, and I was trying to I felt that these culture pieces, this culture is called Margot Levin, One Breath and an Inoculation, and I wanted to kind of make the base would be like a portrait of her or her gallery, so I thought this is what I kind of thought work from her gallery was looking like at the time. So again, I was kind of forced into making sculpture, and this is an image of the Margot Levin culture, which turned out to be quite beautiful, which was nice. A sort of pinkish, purplish haze for Margot. And then this culture was made in New York, and it's the two tallest buildings, the World Trade Center and the Empire State. This is called NATO, a potato, and the Republic of Plato. And as you can see, the color and the base had kind of taken over. I was making the base, or the sculpture part, that holding up part of the sculpture, culture holding part of the sculpture, as sort of influenced by the flags of NATO and all the different colors represented in that. This piece has disappeared. It was shown in Belgium. And the way that the culture was made was I sent a kit with all the agar and everything, and I think it was an assistant of the gallery, went to the doors of NATO and took an inoculation. An inoculation one is this little piece of wire. And took an inoculation from the doors of NATO, took an inoculation from a book, The Republic of Plato, and also took an inoculation from a potato and put them all on the dish. This was a little bit later, not that much. I think this is still the 80s. And, as I said, my degree is in photography, and I kind of had to teach myself about sculpture. I had a great job when I first got out of school, which was to work for a fantastic art bookstore in Los Angeles called Arcana Books. And this is where I got my self-directed master's, I like to call it. There was a show called Individuals at what was then called the Temporary Contemporary and is now called the Geffen Contemporary in Los Angeles. And there was a piece by Chris Burden called Exposing the Foundations of the Museum, which was three pits that he dug to expose the foundations of the museum. And I went to the show and I was a real fan of Chris Burden's work, and I walked down into that first pit you see there, and I was standing down there, and I was looking around, and all of a sudden I see this little bottle embedded in the wall of the pit. And I took it. and I don't know whether it was being young or just kind of being thrown off by by this type of artwork and not really thinking of it as something that I wasn't able to take away from the museum. The title of this piece is something I got out of the museum here in LA. But anyway, when I went home, I started thinking about these things and decided that, really I probably did take art out of the museum and I should probably make art out of it. So I made this little base again, and it says have on the top and want, take, steal, and buy around the edges. This is also the 80s. It's a piece called Rubber Divider. And it depends wherever you put these heavy steel cubes, depends on the tightness or slackness of the rubber. This piece is titled Bird in Space. And again, in my self-constructed sculpture program, I was looking at Brancusi and Brancusi's Bird in Space and thinking about that sculpture and the aerodynamic form of it that was so much made one think of flight, but the material being so bounded to the ground by being heavy bronze. And I wanted to make something that kind of talked about flight in another way, but was still, an homage to that work. So this is nylon cord with 2 steel blocks at either end. And I think you can kind of see the trace of the Bird in Space there. And there's Brancusi's Bird in Space. This is the one in marble. The former was the one in bronze. This piece, we're still in the 80s. This piece is called Corner Basher. And I show this, even though this isn't the greatest image, I show it first because there's so few images of it that exist that actually show that it's an audience-controlled machine. Most of them just show it with the machine itself, and a lot of people think, it's this thing that just constantly hits the wall, but really it is controlled by the viewers of the show or the piece. And this is the control box. It has an on-off switch and a speed control. And the speed control controls that column, how fast it spins. And it's usually placed in a corner, usually chained to the corner, because if it's not, it can actually travel. And people don't usually like that. It's a little dangerous. But it was shown like that at least once, and it was pretty darned exciting. But I really, this piece has been talked about, and for its violence and so on. But I really think of it as something that is a kind of group work, and it's a lot like driving a car in a way. It's about the amplification of our power, and this is an amplification of the group's power and what the group does with it. And also considering what the form and material of the wall and corner are that it's encountering. And so and every time I show it, it makes a different mark. It's kind of like a public drawing that I am providing this large rough pencil to take away. Subtractive drawing, I guess. So you can see that it really changes depending on where it is, the way that it looks. This piece is called Used to Do the Job, and also from still the 80s, and it's everything you need to make a bomb and everything you need to make a bronze sculpture, but again, not in the right order or form. This piece is called Chain, and it's just all the materials that used to be necessary for making a bronze sculpture. Now all these steps are not always needed, especially the plaster. This piece is called Out of Touch, and it again is another homage to Marcel Duchamp and his 16 miles of string. This is 16 miles of surgical gauze all wound up together, and kind of taking something that was very expansive and concentrating it. This piece is called Lash Mat, and it's sort of a soft column. It's false eyelashes on leather, and every time I say this, I confuse people, but it's human hair. It's not human eyelashes. It's human hair, false eyelashes. So that is eyelashes made from human hair, but not eyelashes. And again, it was another homage piece to Bridget Riley. This is her painting crest. Merritt Oppenheim, her teacup, and Louise Nevelson, her grand persona, and the wearing of multiple pairs of false eyelashes. This piece is called Provoben. We are still in the 80s. I will try to hurry up and get through them. It was made in Vienna, and it is, let me see if I can use the pointer. It is it takes the space of the body, foot, torso, and head, and tries to spread it across the gallery so that when you encounter this work, your own body and how you move you're constantly reminded of it as you look at the piece. I made this in Vienna in the end of 1989, and I was living in the first district, but the studio I was using was out of town, and I had to take the subway, and I walked by this kind of great news kiosk every day, and I really am mostly just an English speaker and definitely just an English reader. So I would go there and buy all these different newspapers from different countries and kind of read the images every day. And after doing this for a couple of days, I started making collages, vertical and horizontal, of different heads and faces, and eventually selected some to make this weaving. And did I say the piece is called verwoben, which means it's woven. But and then this is from torso, and these are all fabrics that I found in Vienna that I thought were very Viennese. And this is foot, cotton, and nylon weaving. Those are but there's 4 weavings on each piece. This is a piece called No M, No D, only S and B. And it's leather. They're all very similar, and they're all meant to be shown entwined, but I allow the curator to entwine them however they will. So it always kind of has a different feel to it, I think. This is kind of coming off of verwoben. I had spread the body out through the gallery, and now I kind of wanted to try to bring it in again, and this piece is called Come Together, and it's, again, working with multiple kinds of materials to create this sort of all-around maypole effect. It can be installed in many different spaces and take on different kind of feeling. I think I'm going to show you a few of them. This is the first time it was shown, which was in a group show with Rosemary Trockle and Meg Webster. That's a kind of close-up of the knot in the center where everything comes to and falls from. And this is in another show. This is in Paris at Jennifer Flay Gallery, which unfortunately is no longer there. But this was a great show to be in. It was called Not Quiet. Christian Marclay, Felix Gonzalez Torres, Matthew McCaslin. And that's another of my pieces on the ground. It's called Between Loves Me and Not, which is made of mirror. There's that knot again. And here it is in much later. Had a show at Regan Projects that was like a little mini sort of survey of a few years in the 90s, showing all different works together that had never been in shows together. So the hanging pieces there that you see are called The Wizards, and I'll talk about those a little bit later. But there's Between Loves Me and Not and Come Together again. This is 1990, we made it across the decade line. So I was thinking a lot about color, and I'm still taking myself to school, as I really still am, and thinking about 2-dimensional work and rules and 3-dimensional work, and in 2 dimensions in drawing and painting and ideas, graphics, ideas about colors. There's this idea that opposite colors, complementary colors, when you put them next to each other, they create a kind of buzz. There's a sort of buzzing space in between them. And so I thought, oh, how wonderful would that be to have a sculpture that could do that? So I decided to see if that actually would happen by making these corridors out of opposing colors. So, red, green, purple, yellow, orange, blue. This is red, green, and at Kunsthausgratz. And I used fabric for the red and the orange, and the red fabric was just purchased from the store, and it had dawned on me for the first time that, in terms of color, that when you buy fabric, it's already been sort of stamped with an idea, and it was just strange how much of the red fabric was either it was mostly tardy, it was supposed to be sexy, and And so that was just something kind of interesting that came out of making the piece, like realizing that fabric has already kind of been made into something before you make it into anything else. This is the red, and this is the orange. The orange was a little bit different because I got all of the orange material through thrift shopping and just buying orange sweaters and destroying them and making the orange gradation. And this is that show again. You can see the orange and blue in that show. There's the red and green corridor and the purple and yellow corridor. And that same show at Stuart Regan Gallery in 1990, the big room was the corridor room, and then there's a small passageway where I hung a piece that is called Reflector, and it's made of all different reflective material and kind of curved. It took its shape sort of from a half arc, kind of like an eye, half eye, and there it is in Kunsthaus again. And then you stepped into this other small gallery, and I had, gone away from color and to language and black and white, and tried to make the room have 4 more corners that were illusionistically described by the shape of the letters. It spells out a word. I'll leave it to you to see what it is. And there you can see there's the reflector outside the door. And the floor was covered in sheet tin, so it kind of reflected also. I did a similar show in New York, and but this time I hung the reflector inside the word. And then later on, I reworked this idea again and made the word be written across these sliding, rotating walls. So kind of even more anagrammatic. I've made a lot of X's over the years, and these are the first ones. This is an edition, and it's like, but I think 5 different colors, with one side of the X being a hard line and the other being very organic, made from a wax sculpture, and they're cast in bronze. This piece is called To the Wall, and it's kid leather, steel, and silver, and it's just to be hung in the corner. And the corner is a place that I like to work in. This was, I think, the first of quite a few of the chain sculptures that I had made. This is like 1992, I think. This is in Germany. And it's called Between Us. And the way that I would work with the chain was to kind of transform the looseness, the singularity of the chain, and put it in so much tension that it just became a hard line. So you could climb this. It's in so much tension and kind of pulling these columns together. And this is also in the corner, kind of using the transparency and reflection of the openness and shininess of chain to create this kind of sheen over the corner, so it kind of disappears and reappears just at the top and bottom. And this is a smaller version. This is one that just wraps around the column. And of course, to do this, which I probably didn't know, I knew a little bit but didn't realize fully when I first started doing them, it puts tremendous strain on the building. And I would have to reinforce just to hang the piece. And you can kind of see how much it sort of bites into the architecture where it is. This is called Chain Form on the Diagonal. This piece was first shown in New York at 303 Gallery, and it's called Chain Perspective Reverse Reflected. And I'm sure you probably all know, but the kind of rule of perspective, 2 rules of perspective, is a vanishing point and a diminishing grid that gets smaller towards the vanishing point. So I took, that's usually a 2-dimensional rule to create space in a drawing. So I took that method, that tenet of perspective, and flipped one of the rules, which was the diminishing grid was up in the space nearest to the viewer. And it really makes a very illusionistic you cannot grasp how large the space is, how large the sculpture is, how much room it takes up. The reflected part is that there's always mirrors reflecting into each other that kind of show, infinite space, if you will, but in an illusionistic way. This is Helter-Skelter, which was a show in the 90s. Funnily enough, right over where Chris Burden dug to show the foundations of the museum. And so this one is called Reverse Perspective, Reflected, Extended. And so it was extended through this black room onto like a structure that described the vanishing point. And you can kind of see the amount of tension that it requires to hold those lines straight. That's Nancy Rubens above it. This is in the black room. You can see how as the opening gets wider, the lines get closer together. More of the tension into the mirrors. And this is it in yet another space. This is Conceptual again, which was designed by Peter Cook, and who was the founder of Archigram. And I don't know if you've ever seen this space in person, but it's supposed to, not be the white cube. It really isn't. It's a very strange space to exhibit in. It's interesting. It was interesting to try to put this extremely rectilinear, perspectival piece into this space. So and this was the first time that you could get on the other side of the perspective and look back the other way. So this is the closest point of the vanishing point. And this is in the front. And you can see how it just seems like a space you couldn't even walk into. But in fact, you are able to walk through it. And the way that, you sort of know what you're looking at really is by using your own mobility and walking around the piece. And at that point, you've gained the knowledge, not just the visual kind of trick of the illusion created by this reverse perspective, but you understand how big it is. So this was a show that I was in. It was a 2-woman show with Maria Lasnik called I or the Zwei or the Etwas, which means 2 or 3 or something, which is the title of a piece of mine that I'll show you later. There's Maria Lasnik's paintings. So I did it another time. This is kind of just an idea, this piece, and it can be really real. It doesn't have a scale or even a material that it has to be in. And it just is kind of a mathematical form that can be applied to any space, really. And so this was this amazing building. This was the Seville Biennial, curated by Okoye-Nozar. And it was an 8th century shipbuilding building. And we couldn't put that kind of force onto this really old building. So I realized it in scaffolding. And here are the wizards, or the wizards, as they are called in Austria. And I haven't done that much figurative work, but again, I think probably because in my own course in sculpture, I wanted to address the physical because there's such a rich history of figurative work. I used not the body, but what goes on top of the body for these. It describes the body, and they're lined with mirror, so they kind of take on whatever is outside of them. And they also sort of, as you can see in this one, they kind of hide themselves when you're at a view where they kind of come together. You can't really distinguish the form at all, but in other vantage points, you really can. This is that show again. Showed them. Takes on the dark and the light. So this is another figurative show, and it had a long title that I somehow forgot, and I just call it The Hands now. So the idea here was to take the hands, which are, very expressive part of the body, and to have 10 different hands I used different kind of ways of getting at them. Some were life cast, and I sculpted some at like half scale, and others were sculptures that I had found of hands. And I made 10 casts of each, so there were about 100 hands, somewhere in there, something like that. And then hung them in these different forms. So it's like one gesture that, depending on how it's held in space, kind of becomes other gestures. And so the idea was like, what is that when it's, this large group of them? You can't really distinguish any of the gestures. It's this overall field. This is just another angle of it. But when you got up close to them or separated them out, they became like, very sort of directly expressive in a way and dramatic. So I'm just showing you that. Line is also very important to me, and an organic line is something that's quite important to me. And this is a pretty early piece where I was using line, just aptly called corner twig. So it's twigs that were cast in iron and then intermingled. This is a piece from 1997, I think. It's a show. I don't know if any of you are familiar with he's actually born in Austria, but the California architect Rudolf Schindler. He had built this apartment building. It's called the Mackey Apartment Buildings, and the Museum for Art and Kunst in Vienna purchased it and has turned it into a foundation and a residency. And so this was the first show that kind of started that off, and it's Peter Kugler, Heimo Zobernick, Paul McCarthy, and Svetlana Huger. And my piece is about Agave Americana coming out of the garage, the last garage, and this piece is called Park. And I don't know, I have been in Texas quite a bit. I don't know if these are as ubiquitous in Texas as they are in Southern California, but in Southern California you see these plants everywhere, and they're also called century plants, which just kind of means that they don't last a century, but it takes about 20 years before a bloom comes out, and then it's a season, and it blooms and turns to seed, and then the plant dies, and it becomes this kind of beautiful, there's all these kind of beautiful half tilting over, half vertical, older agaves all over, and blooming agaves all over Southern California. So I decided to move one into town and put it inside this garage, and there's the indoor side of it, and turn it into a planter. And think of it as kind of like an small urban apartment-sized park. And that's a drip line. I also showed it on the Plaza of Mocha at my survey show there. And I think we put orchids in the base. And this is another version of it. It's also called Park. You're probably familiar with the artist Andrea Zittel, and she does something called High Desert Test Site out. She organizes this show. It's mostly every year. And she asked if I would be in it. And, honestly, I kind of didn't want to, because I really didn't want to put anything in the desert. Both the desert and the ocean, I love and fear. And I don't really like to see, things outside of nature or culture necessarily in them, but I wanted to, kind of take the challenge and try to make something. So I did another version of Park, and there had been a freeze that year, and one of my yuccas had not done well, so I took it out, and I actually painted part of it, and then used a Joshua tree as its planter, and I planted actually some other cactuses inside of that, and sort of used the Joshua tree as I had used the Agave Americana. This is just a model of an open form piece that I made when I was about 96. I moved out of town and didn't really have a studio, and I was doing a lot of models, and got very interested in these open form pieces, and this is something that came out of that. This is called Divecchiello, and also kind of working with color, thinking a lot about sculpture and form and density and mass and volume, and trying to have color and the way form is rendered kind of change how we think about that or how that happens. This is even more extreme in that regard. This is called 2, or 2 as 3 and some 2. And, again, like using the color to kind of change the form. So the idea is that you have both at the same time. You have your sense of illusion, yet you still somehow sense the form that this is 2 things instead of 1. And it really changes and moves as you move around it. This is then the Conceptual space. And you can really see from a close-up how kind of, it's like you can figure it out, but your brain always wants to make something different from it. And then I was wondering, could I just do this with one color? Could I just do it with yellows? And it kind of worked. This is the one that the show had been named after, called 2 or 3 or something. And even though it's a steady object, it has a lot of this sense like it's sort of jumping around. And this is in Texas. This is in Dallas. This is at the Howard Wachowski house. I did an outdoor version for him. And so a lot of other sculptures kind of followed from this. This is called Ignis Fake. This is, I Thought I Saw a Pussycat. And I was thinking, I titled it that because I was thinking about animation in comparison with sculpture and how seemingly different they are. But then it's only because of how we sort of define them, really. And sculpture has kind of come to be the real as we understand it, solid. And so I wanted to try to make something that really was a sculpture but counteracted that. And so I used this form, this teardrop-shaped form, but altered the color on each one. So you really can't see the total form of what's making this just because the color changes it and the yellow goes with the yellow. And so it's actually a pretty organized form in itself, but it looks very chaotic. And so the way that this show worked was you would come in one end and you'd see this sort of cloud of color, and then the closer you got to it, kind of more physical it became. And you could come in the other door too and have the opposite experience. This is in another space. And so we did this little cartoon for the catalog of Sylvester, which is where the title came from. I thought I saw a pretty tat. I did, or I didn't, and kind of him trying to figure out Schrodinger's cat, There he is, jumping out of the animation world. This is just a drawing of it. This is another sculpture using the same form, but a different methodology of the color, where it is the same piece that has the same color, but the red and the blue kind of interrupt each other in a way that you can't really tell. It looks like a solid object, but actually it's a big loop. This is the largest thing that I've ever made. It's a pedestrian bridge. It's in Burbank. It connects the ABC building with the Disney lot, and it's right next to the 134 freeway. And right on the other side of that is Forest Lawn, which is a huge cemetery. So I wanted to make something, that, well, I guess in some ways would distract you while you were driving, but hopefully not too much. And that, kind of looked like a piece of film, and also kind of reminiscent of maybe a ride at Disneyland, and had this curving racetrack kind of feel to the roof. So this is how it encounters the ABC building. I really like that shot. This is it at night. It lights up at night. It's kind of like a ribbon going across Riverside Drive. Oh my God. That's inside at night. This is the stairway. I found out a lot about architecture doing this, and I have to say I'm glad that I'm a sculptor. But one of, reality limits what we can do, doesn't maybe limit us in animation, but in sculpture there are limitations, but in architecture there are even more, and they're called code. I realized that I wanted to make a spiral staircase, and it's not legal anymore in the United States to make a spiral staircase, which I think is really strange, and the reason why is because too many people don't pay attention to their embodiment, and they fall down or fall up spiral staircases, and it's not legal anymore. And so you can make a circular staircase, but you cannot make a spiral staircase, which is this very dynamic form, twisting form. So to kind of try to remedy that, I made this much wider banister at the bottom that hopefully swooped up and kind of recaptured some of the energy of a spiral staircase. So this is just a color study again. It's another drawing. It's the same drawing, but with the color in different places. I made a very large sculpture for my show at MoCA in 2001. And I made it, I wanted to use, I was thinking a little bit about the film, and I wanted to use the computer to do it. So I made an animation of a sphere turning into a, you can kind of see up here, a sphere, you can't see the animation, I don't have that, but a sphere turning into a cube and a cube turning back into a sphere. And then I selected two forms in between the sphere and the cube and two other forms in between the cube and the sphere. And then I took all of those in the computer and pushed them into one space. And then I thought, okay, I really want to show movement, animation. I'm going to rotate them in 3 axes. So I did, and it actually kind of killed it. This is the one that was rotated in 3 axes. So I realized that was the limit. I had to go back. So I rotated it in 2 axes, and I got something that was very animated and had a lot of movement in it. And so that was, and then I said I pushed everything out to the surface except for the sphere. And it's kind of like the hidden noise in the piece. So then it was about like, what is the color on this going to be? And I really wanted to do something that was very iridescent, but I tried to compose stuff, and luckily I came across this incredible paint that is highly iridescent and has an interesting story to it itself. It's a byproduct of the computer as well, because it came from trying to make it's made of laser cut particles, and these particles were first made to be able to store information on, and it's actually in the same technology as in money, in the strands of money where you can make sure that it's not counterfeit. So those iridescent strands in money is the same technology as this paint comes from. So that, first of all, it did what I wanted it to do, which was create this highly iridescent surface that never looked the same from any viewpoint. And also it agreed with the whole computer generation of the piece. So as a form, it's many and one, and you kind of can't get to one or the other. As soon as you call this one thing, it's like there's all these other things. So it sort of hovers there always, kind of. And as you move around it, it also really changes. This is at the Albright Knox. The first picture was at MoCA. So you can see how the color really shifts depending on where you're standing and the time of day and the light and all that stuff. This is at the Friendly Alien at Kunsthausgras. That's what they call the building there, the Friendly Alien. It's much harsher with those crazy spiraling fluorescent lights. And this is it outside in front of the MCA in Chicago. It spent the summer out there. And then it spent the one winter in New York from October to May at Fund for Public Art at the corner of 5th and 60th at the southeast corner of Central Park. So,
what is the material?
that's all right. The shell is ceramic. I mean, not ceramic. That'd be good. The shell is fiberglass. And here it is. I love this placement. This is inside at a genetics lab in San Francisco. It's a little monster for them. So there's some more open form pieces. This piece is called The Wall. It took a really long time to make. But again, working with color, kind of working with ideas of sculptural density. You know, what is that? What makes up volume? How can color work in sculpture differently than in other forms? This is actually, I believe, in a collection here. I think Dee Dee Rose has this in her collection. This really illustrates it very well. This is looking at this piece from the side. And this is looking at it dead on. And this is looking at it from the other side. This is called Surprisingly Nameless. So I'm going to hurry up here. Let's see. Oh, I better really hurry up. Okay, so we'll just say more open form pieces taken from portraits of women throughout the course of art history. The palette. So Karen Klimnik. I won't go through them all. Gauguin. Avery. Fra Felipe Lipe. Okay. This is called Ghost Story, and it's cast bronze taken from limbs. This is where it is in Colorado in the winter. So this piece, well, I am really running out of time. I was going to read something to you in this, but this show really was, a lot of times the shows that I do, I try to have, there's always usually an idea. And so this was 2005, and I was thinking about, America at that time, and the war, and also Manifest Destiny. And so the piece in the front is called RWBs, and the one in the back is called Her Diamond Deserts, and then these are ceramic pieces called The Smiles, and the black piece on the wall is called And Then There Are Hills. It's kind of about California and America. I'm a native Californian, and the little gold piece is called Guest. Close up. This is called High Strength, and it relates to they both relate to the high strength aluminum tubes that kind of got us into the war in Iraq, and the idea of what sculpture and real things and the lies and truths of materials. Okay, I won't read this to you. I wish I could, but I should hurry up. This is from Joan Didion's book, Book of Common Prayer. And it kind of describes, so maybe I'll just read this one to you. Well, I don't know if I can from here. But, yeah. These are called The Smiles. And they're cast porcelain. And usually showing them here on neoprene-clad bases. This is inside Her Diamond Deserts. Cracked smile. Smile with a guest. That's the originals. They were foam core. These are the guests. The idea with these sculptures were to make something that didn't really have a place, could be anywhere. It didn't have to be on a base. It could be on a base. It didn't have to be. It could be on your body. It could be on the floor. It could be on the wall. It could be on a pedestal. Could take different forms. The big thing about this was trying to get it not to, getting the system so that it wouldn't hang up. That was a lot of work. And they did make it into fabric. And there was a fashion show with some friends that used the fabric to make some things and show off work. So this is a show from 2010 at Recon Projects. And like I said, every show sort of comes kind of from somewhere and then ends up somewhere else. And this show kind of came from, my mother had died. I was thinking a lot of, the transience of life and things ending. And so everything here in this show is pretty dark, colored, until you get up close to it, and then its color really reveals itself. And I'll kind of go through that. The bronze piece on the wall is called Lux Interior. This was the lead singer of the Cramps, a band that I really like, and he had died also that year, a heart attack. So let's see, that's the smile. It's called Smile After Dark. The piece on the wall is called Planchette. And the X piece is called Thereby Hangs a Tale That Is Another Story. And the ceramic pieces on the wall are from the After Fluorescence series and the Herbal Remedy series. So let me get to some close-ups. So there's Lux. I did it in different, plated differently, and this is the cast rubber one. These are from the After Fluorescence and Herbal Remedy series. They're painted ceramic. And this is Smile After Dark. And so you can kind of see that, as you get up close, the color really comes out, and it's another thing once you approach it. And same with this. Well, I don't know if you can see that. I can't see it, but it's pretty colorful when you get up. And this one too. I think you can probably see that. And it also really changes a lot as you move around it, the form. This is my show at Tanya Benakdar Gallery. That's a tissue painting. This show was inspired by the great film Red Desert by Antonioni. And I think that film it's such a beautiful film, and the use of color is like extraordinary. And also I think it's probably one of the first environmental films. So I was thinking about it. The piece on the wall and floor is called After Red Desert, and that kind of mustard color and purple color are taken from the film. The purple color was used when there's like a hallucination or something unreal happening, and then the mustard color was used to kind of talk a little bit about industry, but also was the color of the little boy's coat and her son's coat. So I'll just take you around the show and quickly, and we'll talk about, I think I have pictures of the individual pieces too. So this is a sticker. This After Red Desert is a sticker. It's not a painting. And it just conforms to the architecture there. And it really also sort of undulates in like how you see it, how it appears. So this is another smile. This one's called Smile Alluvium. Close up, it does that same thing with darkness and color. Oops. This is called Fictile, which means earthen or made from, or pottery, refers to pottery. These are all ceramic, I should say. This is called Transpicuous Broom. This is called Volatant Solids. It's kind of lifted, a graphic lifted sort of directly from the film. This is called Blue and Green, which was the original title for After Red Desert. This is painted ceramic. This is another planchette. The planchette is a series that I've been doing and continue to do. This, I think you may have seen it. I believe this piece belongs to the MCA. I mean, the Dallas Museum of Art, excuse me. This is called Six. It's another X, soft and hard form. Really changes again as you move around it. This is another smile, and just kind of wanted to show you the coloration. So this is another show, this little blue corner. This is another planchette. So by the way, this is all pretty recent. This is 2011. This is a Caesura, which is a series that I'm working on. I'll be showing a lot of these in January in my show at Recon Projects. And it's ceramic, and the idea with these pieces is that it's a slab that I put over a form, and whatever happens to the crack, however the crack is made, is kind of like, oh, I'm going the wrong way, am I? It's kind of a, just what happens. There's another one coming up. This one's called Passage. This is when it doesn't crack. And they're all epoxy on ceramic. This one's called Octan, also epoxy on ceramic. This is another caesura. And another planchette. This is very recent. I made this one this year. And yet another caesura. And this is a little teaser for Exchange, which I'm very happy to be being a part of in October. So that's it. That's my lecture. Thank you. We've gone over a little bit. If you want to ask a question, I'd be happy, but otherwise we can just go to the reception, and that's fine too, whatever you'd like. Yes?
Is this wood?
Yes, it's maple. Anything else?
This will be in a show in October?
This will not be in the show in October. This is just a little teaser. It's a form that I've been working on that the piece that I'm going to be showing in October was informed by. So it's just gives you an idea and a different material and slightly different scale and shape of what I'm going to be doing for the show at Exchange. Yes.
What is the material of the piece the Dallas Museum now has called the planchette?
That is a paper called, it's an aluminum substructure, and paper called mulberry paper, and egg tempera is the paint. Yes?
What's the piece you did not read from
Joan Didion?
Yeah.
We can go back to it. It's quite something. It talks about the colors red, white, and blue. And it's at the very end of the book. At the very end of the Book of Common Prayer, and if you ever pick up one, you'll see it. It's one page, and it's the 4th chapter. So I can read it if you'd like. If you want to take that time, I'd be happy to. Would you like that? Okay, let's go back. I might have to get down on the floor for that one. The longer reading was an article, we'll go back to that. It was an article about the aluminum tubes, and it was a 41-page article in the New York Times about the aluminum tubes that, I'll read you the first part of that too. It's kind of important. We're almost there. Oh my goodness. I wish I had my computer up here. Okay, so let me get down here. The nuclear card, the aluminum tube story, a special report, how the White House embraced suspect Iraqi arms intelligence. In 2002, at a critical juncture on the path to war, senior members of the Bush administration gave a series of speeches and interviews in which they asserted that Saddam Hussein was rebuilding his nuclear weapons program. Speaking to a group of Wyoming Republicans in September, Vice President Dick Cheney said the United States now had irrefutable evidence, thousands of tubes made of high-strength aluminum tubes that the Bush administration said were designed for clandestine Iraqi uranium centrifuges before some were seized at the behest of the United States. Those tubes became a critical exhibit in the administration's brief against Iraq as the only physical evidence. So, the only physical evidence that turned out to be, when they actually got the physical evidence, not what they thought it was. And this is from Joan Didion. All I can tell you directly about Charlotte Douglas's death is that I sent her body to San Francisco I had the body put in a coffin, and I went to the airport with the coffin, and I waited there until I could see for myself the coffin loaded into the hold of the first Pan-American flight to leave Boca Grande after the October violence. I wanted to lay a flag on the coffin, but there were no American flags in Boca Grande that week, and in the end, I bought a child's t-shirt in the gift shop at the airport. This t-shirt was printed like an American flag. I dropped this t-shirt on the coffin as it was loaded into the hold of the Boeing. I think this t-shirt did not have the correct number of stars or stripes, but it did have the appearance of stars and stripes, and it was red, and it was white, and it was blue. There was no real point in that either. So I like to think about that. Have you think about that when you look at this. Thank you.